My boss replaced me with his nephew 2 days before I finalized a multi-million-dollar project. Now I own the rights. Hi, I'm Taryn Blake, and I'm 32 years old. What happened to me could happen to anyone who believes hard work will always protect them. Before I take you through the betrayal, the breakdown, and how I turned it all around to own the very thing they tried to steal, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. If you enjoy real stories where justice isn't just served, but delivered with interest, this is the place for you. Now let me tell you how losing everything became the best thing that ever happened to me. Let me tell you exactly how I destroyed a Fortune 500 company and built my own empire, from the ashes of corporate betrayal. It was 11:47 p.m. when I put the finishing touches on PulseChain, the supply chain platform that would either save Nexora Tech or destroy it completely. I just didn't know I'd be the one making that choice. My fingers had been dancing across the keyboard for 11 months of 18-hour days, crafting each algorithm with the precision of a master sculptor. The revolutionary platform hummed perfectly on my monitor, displaying $42 million in projected first-year revenue. At 32, I'd already spent 8 years in tech, but this was my masterpiece. Still here, Taryn? Grant Teller appeared beside my cubicle, coffee in hand. At 38, he was one of the few colleagues who understood the magnitude of what I'd built. Just putting the finishing touches on tomorrow's presentation, I replied, stretching my arms. 42 million, Grant. Can you believe it? Grant whistled low, studying my screen. Reid's been sweating bullets about the board meeting. This could save the company. I smiled, remembering the skeptical faces when I'd first pitched this concept. Nexora desperately needed this win. Their quarterly losses had been mounting for over a year, and investors were growing impatient. 3 major corporations were lined up to sign contracts that would single-handedly reverse our financial decline. Tomorrow changes everything, Grant said, heading home. He had no idea how right he was. In less than 12 hours, Reid Mercer would walk into his office and detonate my entire world with a single sentence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. See, what Reid didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I owned the very foundation his company was built on. And I was about to make him pay for every second of disrespect. 18 months earlier, during a 3-month sabbatical between jobs, I developed the revolutionary algorithmic framework that would become PulseChain's foundation. Working from my apartment, I'd solved supply chain optimization problems that had stumped the industry for years. I'd spent the next 7 months consulting for various logistics companies, refining my framework, and building a reputation as an innovative problem solver. When Nexora offered me the lead developer position, I'd been transparent about my existing intellectual property. My onboarding email to HR and legal explicitly stated, "I'm bringing proprietary framework technology that I developed independently during my consulting period. Happy to license it for company use while maintaining personal ownership." The response had been typical corporate dismissiveness. "We'll handle IP documentation after you start. Just focus on building the product." 6 months into my tenure, when legal still hadn't formalized the arrangement, I'd registered my framework under a strategic license. The documentation was crystal clear. Anyone could use the technology for operational purposes, but commercial profit required explicit written consent from the copyright holder. Me. I'd sent another email to legal, copying HR, following up on IP documentation for my pre-existing framework. License attached for your review. No response. I'd told myself it was just protection, insurance against corporate politics. After watching talented colleagues get pushed aside while executives claimed credit, I wanted leverage. Now, staring at the completed project built on my foundation, I remembered that foresight. Reid Mercer had no idea what he was actually dealing with. The morning sun streamed through Nexora's floor-to-ceiling windows as I prepared for what I believed would be my moment of triumph. Taryn Blake to Reid Mercer's office. Immediately. The intercom announcement cut through the morning bustle like a blade. I glanced at Grant, who raised an eyebrow. Reid had been increasingly stressed lately. Board meetings with potential acquisition partners, investor calls about youth leadership initiatives, and whispered conversations about positioning Nexora for a strategic sale. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt longer than usual. Through the glass walls, I could see Reid pacing behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, the millennial demographic is crucial for the acquisition narrative, I heard him say as the doors opened. Reid's office was a monument to corporate ambition. Glass desk, minimalist decor, and photos strategically placed to showcase his Harvard MBA and industry connections. At 45, he'd mastered the art of looking innovative without actually creating anything. Taryn, come in, sit down. His smile was too wide, too practiced. I just finished a fascinating call with our acquisition consultants. They've been analyzing market positioning, and frankly, we need to modernize our leadership presentation. Something cold settled in my stomach. Modernize? Well, you've done incredible work. Truly exceptional. Reid leaned back in his leather chair. But the consultants are clear. Potential buyers want to see dynamic, forward-thinking leadership, fresh faces that resonate with younger demographics. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'm sorry, what are you suggesting? Kellen will be taking over the final negotiations and client demos. His energy and contemporary perspective will be exactly what our acquisition partners want to see. I felt my vision narrow. Kellen Rowe, Reid's 27-year-old nephew who'd joined the company 3 months ago with zero field experience. Reid, I built this system from the ground up. And you'll be fully credited, of course. Kellen Rowe strutted into Reid's office like he owned the building. Designer suit, expensive watch, and the kind of confidence that came from having 50,000 LinkedIn followers and a verified Twitter account. His MBA from a prestigious program meant nothing when it came to understanding supply chain technology, but his social media influence had caught Reid's attention. Uncle Reid told me the good news, Kellen said, not even glancing at me. I'm excited to bring PulseChain's story to a broader audience. My marketing analytics show we could potentially reach millions through strategic content partnerships. My hands clenched in my lap. Kellen, with respect, you've been here 3 months. You don't understand the technical architecture or the client requirements. He laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. That's exactly why I'm perfect for this. Sometimes being too close to a project makes you miss the bigger narrative. Remap, my social media following includes major industry influencers, and I've got connections at TechCrunch, Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine. Social media followers don't close $40 million deals, I interrupted. Reid leaned forward eagerly. Actually, they might. Our acquisition consultants emphasize the importance of thought leadership and digital brand presence. Kellen's platform could generate the kind of buzz that multiplies our valuation. Plus, Kellen continued smugly, I understand modern business communication. These Fortune 500 executives want to see innovation that speaks their language, not just technical specifications. I stared at him in disbelief. You mean they want someone who looks the part rather than someone who built the product? Exactly, Reid exclaimed, missing my sarcasm entirely. Kellen represents the future of tech leadership. The room fell silent as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Maya Delaney answered her phone on the second ring. Taryn? What's wrong? You sound terrible. Sitting in my car in Nexora's parking garage, I let the tears come. They're giving PulseChain to Reid's nephew, 2 days before the biggest presentation of my career. What? Maya's voice shifted from concern to fury. Are you kidding me? After everything you've put into that project? Maya had been my best friend since college, brilliant, fierce, and now a successful intellectual property attorney at Morrison & Associates. If anyone understood the legal implications of corporate betrayal, it was Maya. I can't believe I was so naive, I said. I actually thought merit mattered. Taryn, listen to me carefully. Do you have any legal protection? Any documentation about your contributions? My tears stopped as a memory surfaced, the sabbatical framework, the ignored emails to legal, the license I'd filed. Actually, I might. What do you mean? The core framework, I own it. I documented everything. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Maya spoke again, her voice was different, sharp, calculating. Taryn, I need you to come to my office right now, but first, I need to ask you something important. What? Are you prepared to potentially destroy Reid's company? Because if we use this leverage, there's no going back. Innocent people might get hurt. I stared at the office building where I'd sacrificed everything for 11 months. I don't know. Maybe I should just walk away quietly. That's exactly why we need to talk in person. This decision will define your entire career. Maya's office overlooked downtown's financial district, its walls lined with legal victories and intellectual property awards. She spread my documents across the conference table like a general planning a battle. This is beautiful, Maya said, studying the sabbatical documentation and email trail. Absolutely airtight. You licensed the framework for operational use, but retained ownership and commercial rights. I paced by the window, wrestling with conflicting emotions. But Maya, what about Grant? What about all the other innocent employees who've worked hard on this project? That's exactly why timing is crucial, Maya replied. If we act strategically, we can minimize collateral damage while maximizing pressure on Reid specifically. What do you mean? Maya pulled up a calendar on her laptop. 24 hours before the presentation, not a minute sooner, not a minute later. Early enough to prevent the fraud from occurring, late enough that Reid can't pivot or negotiate his way out. But people will lose their jobs. Taryn, listen to me. Maya's voice was gentle but firm. Reid made a calculated decision to steal your work and destroy your career. Companies survive legal challenges all the time, but they don't survive without their core innovations. You're not destroying Nexora, you're forcing them to acknowledge who actually created their most valuable asset. I sank into a chair, the weight of the decision crushing. This feels so vindictive. No, it's strategic, and it's justice. Maya leaned forward. But I won't file these papers unless you're absolutely certain. Because once we do this, there's no going back. The choice hung between us like a blade waiting to fall. We need to time this perfectly, Maya explained, pulling up a calendar. The client presentations are day after tomorrow. If we file the injunction too early, they'll have time to negotiate or rebuild. Too late, and the damage is done. I studied the legal documents Maya had prepared. Cease and desist orders, copyright violation claims, and temporary restraining orders that would freeze Pulse Chain's commercial use. 24 hours before the presentation, Maya continued. We serve the papers right as they're doing final preparations. Maximum chaos, minimum recovery time. This feels so calculated, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Good, it should be calculated. They made a calculated decision to betray you. Maya's expression softened. Taryn, you have every legal right to protect your intellectual property. They're the ones who chose to build their future on stolen foundation. Grant's words from the night before echoed in my mind. Tomorrow changes everything. He had no idea how prophetic that statement would become. What about afterwards? I asked. Even if this works, I'll never work in tech again. Reid will make sure of that. Maya's grin was wicked. Who says you need to work for anyone else? The idea hung in the air between us, dangerous, thrilling, and completely possible. I owned the most revolutionary supply chain technology in development. The Fortune 500 clients who were expecting to see Pulse Chain wouldn't care about corporate politics. They'd care about results. Back at Nexora, I delivered the performance of my lifetime. I congratulated Kellen publicly, handed over documentation with a smile, and wished him luck with genuine-sounding warmth. I really appreciate how gracefully you're handling this transition, Reid said, looking almost guilty. It shows real professionalism. Of course, I replied. The company's success is what matters most. If only he knew what company I was actually referring to. Kellen, meanwhile, was drowning in technical specifications he couldn't understand. I watched him frantically highlight sections of my documentation, clearly lost in the complexity of database architecture and algorithmic logic. The neural network optimization is pretty straightforward, I offered helpfully. Just remember that the predictive modeling relies on recursive data parsing. He nodded eagerly, as if those words meant anything to him. Grant approached my desk that afternoon, just concern etched on his face. You're taking this awfully well. Sometimes change is good, I said carefully. Opens up new opportunities. He studied my expression, noting something he couldn't quite identify. If you need anything, references, recommendations, you know I'm here. I smiled genuinely for the first time all day. I might take you up on that sooner than you think. As the office emptied that evening, I looked around one last time. Tomorrow would be the beginning of the end for Reid Mercer and his nepotistic empire. Maya worked through the night, crafting legal documentation with surgical precision. Each form was designed to create maximum disruption while maintaining ironclad legal standing. "Cease and desist for unauthorized commercial use of copyrighted material," she muttered, typing. "Temporary restraining order preventing any revenue-generating activities using pulse chain technology. Copyright infringement claims seeking damages and immediate cessation of all related business activities." The beauty of intellectual property law was its clarity. Ownership was ownership, regardless of corporate politics or family connections. At 3 a.m., Maya called me. "Everything's ready. The server will deliver the documents to Nexora at 9 a.m. tomorrow, exactly 24 hours before their presentation. Are you sure about the timing?" "Trust me. I've seen corporate panic before. 9 a.m. gives them just enough time to realize they're screwed, but not enough time to fix it." I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. By this time tomorrow, Reid's world would be collapsing. Kellen's moment of glory would become a nightmare. And Pulse Chain, my creation, would be free from their control. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Professional, but not corporate. I was no longer representing Nexora Tech. I was representing myself. As I drove to the office, my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Documents filed, server en route, T-4 hours until impact." The countdown had begun. At exactly 9 a.m., a process server walked into Nexora Tech's gleaming lobby. He carried a manila envelope that would detonate Reid Mercer's carefully constructed world. I was at my desk, ostensibly working on routine tasks, when the call came over the intercom. "Reid Mercer to reception immediately." I glanced at Grant, who was reviewing quarterly reports. "Probably another vendor meeting," he said absently. If only he knew. 15 minutes later, Reid's assistant burst into the open office area, face pale. She whispered urgently to several senior managers who immediately headed toward the executive floor. The ripple effect began slowly. Confused murmurs, then alarmed phone calls, then the sound of rapid footsteps on polished floors. Kellen appeared at my desk, his usual swagger replaced by panic. "Something's happening with the presentation. Reid wants to see you immediately." "Oh?" I managed to look concerned. "I hope everything's okay." The elevator ride to Reid's office felt like ascending to witness an execution. Through the glass walls, I could see Reid pacing frantically while several lawyers huddled around his desk. When I entered, Reid's face was flushed with rage and desperation. "Taryn, we have a problem. Apparently someone is claiming ownership of Pulse Chain's core technology." "Really?" I kept my voice steady. "That's strange. Who would make such a claim?" Reid's eyes narrowed as he studied my reaction, searching for any sign of guilt or knowledge. "We're about to find out." "The copyright claim is filed under the name Taryn Blake," the lawyer announced, reading from the legal documents. The conference room fell silent. Reid's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, fury. Kellen looked like he might vomit. "That's impossible," Reid said slowly. "Taryn, tell them this is a mistake." All eyes turned to me. This was the moment of truth, the point of no return. I thought of 11 months of sacrificed weekends, of watching less qualified colleagues get promoted, of Reid's casual dismissal of my contributions. "It's not a mistake," I said quietly. The words landed like a bomb. Reid's composure cracked completely. "What the hell are you talking about? You built Pulse Chain on company time, with company resources." "I built Pulse Chain using a framework I created and copyrighted independently," I replied. "The company has operational rights under the license I granted, but commercial use requires my written consent." One of the lawyers, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, studied the documents intently. "She's right. This is legitimate intellectual property protection." Reid slammed his hand on the table. "This is sabotage. You planned this." "I protected my work," I corrected. "You chose to replace me with your nephew 2 days before the most important presentation of my career. You chose to steal credit for my innovation." Kellen finally found his voice. "Uncle Reid, what does this mean for tomorrow?" The lead lawyer answered before Reid could speak. "It means you can't present Pulse Chain to those clients. Any resulting contracts would be invalid and expose the company to massive legal liability." Reid's office became a war room as executives and lawyers scrambled to find solutions. I sat calmly in the center of the chaos, watching my former boss disintegrate. "We'll rebuild the system," Reid declared. "Start from scratch. How long would that take?" The head of development, a tired-looking man in his 60s, shook his head. Pulse Chain represents 11 months of complex algorithmic development. To rebuild from scratch, 18 months minimum, maybe 2 years. "What about licensing the technology from Taryn?" another executive suggested. All eyes turned to me again. Reid's expression was pleading, desperate. "Taryn, we can work this out. What would it take?" I'd been waiting for this moment, but not for negotiation, for acknowledgement. "I want full recognition as Pulse Chain's creator. I want written confirmation that I own the core intellectual property, and I want a formal apology for this morning's termination." Reid's face went white. That's not about money?" "This was never about money, Reid. It was about respect." Kellen, who had been silent throughout the conversation, suddenly exploded. "This is ridiculous. I have an MBA from—" "You have an MBA and 3 months of experience," I cut him off. "I have the legal right to shut down this entire project." The lawyers exchanged meaningful glances. They knew leverage when they saw it, but they also recognized that I wasn't making unreasonable demands. Reid's next words would determine whether this could be resolved professionally or would escalate into corporate warfare. And I already knew what his pride would choose. "Absolutely not," Reid snarled. "I won't be held hostage by a disgruntled employee. We'll find another way." I had expected this response. Reid's ego would never allow him to admit that a woman he'd just demoted held all the power. "Then you'll need to postpone the client presentations," the lawyer said. "Indefinitely." "No." Reid's voice echoed off the glass walls. "I've spent months setting up these meetings. Our investors are expecting results. The board is watching every move." "Reid," one of the senior managers said carefully, "maybe we should consider Taryn's terms. Recognition and respect seem reasonable for someone who created the technology." But Reid was beyond rational thought. His reputation, his family connections, his nephew's career, everything was on the line. Pride overruled business sense. "I built this company," he said through gritted teeth. "I won't be held hostage by someone who's already committed corporate sabotage." I stood up slowly. "Then I guess we're done here." "You're damn right we're done," Reid shot back. "You're fired. Security will escort you out immediately." The lawyers looked horrified. "Reid, you can't." "She's terminated, effective immediately." I smiled, genuinely this time. "Perfect. That makes what happens next so much easier." As security appeared at the door, I gathered my personal items with deliberate calm. I'd prepared for this moment, knowing Reid's ego would ultimately destroy him. Walking toward the elevator, I turned back one last time. "The client presentations are scheduled for 2 p.m. tomorrow. You might want to call them." Within hours of my termination, word spread through Nexora like wildfire. The company's biggest project was dead in the water, killed by corporate politics and legal oversight. Grant found me in the parking garage as I loaded my boxes. "What the hell happened up there?" "Reid made his choice," I said simply. "Now he gets to live with the consequences." "The whole company's buzzing. People are saying you sabotaged the project." I paused, studying my loyal colleague's face. "Grant, what do you know about startup funding?" The question caught him off guard. "Some." "Why?" "How would you feel about becoming head of operations for a new company, one that actually has revolutionary supply chain technology to offer?" Grant's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Taryn, you're not serious. I own Pulse Chain's core technology. I have 11 months of client relationship building, and as of 1 hour ago, I have no non-compete agreement with Nexora." I smiled. "I'm very serious." Inside Nexora's offices, panic was setting in. The Fortune 500 clients had to be contacted and informed that tomorrow's presentations were canceled. Investors started asking uncomfortable questions about the company's primary revenue driver. Reid locked himself in his office, frantically calling contacts who might help him find a legal loophole. Kellen sat at his new desk, staring at technical documentation he couldn't comprehend, realizing his moment of glory had become a career-ending nightmare. By evening, 3 senior developers had quietly updated their LinkedIn profiles. The exodus was beginning. Maya's office buzzed with excitement as we planned our next move. The timing couldn't be better. Nexora's clients are going to be looking for alternatives, and you have exactly what they need. But starting a company from scratch, you're not starting from scratch. You have the technology, you have the client relationships, and now you have the perfect motivation. Maya pulled up incorporation documents on her laptop. We can have Pulse Origin LLC registered by tomorrow morning. Pulse Origin. I liked the sound of it, a name that honored the technology's true origins while promising something new. What about funding? With your track record and the client interest you've already generated, investors will be fighting each other to get in. Maya's confidence was infectious. Plus, you'll have immediate revenue potential. Those Fortune 500 companies don't care about corporate drama. They care about solutions. My phone rang. Grant's name appeared on the screen. I've been thinking about what you said, he began without preamble. When do we start? The first member of my team had just committed. Within 24 hours, 2 more senior developers from Nexora called, quietly asking about opportunities. Reid's decision to fire me was creating the exact outcome he'd tried to prevent: the exodus of talent and the loss of Pulse Chain's competitive advantage. Tomorrow, while Reid scrambled to explain to clients why their promised demonstration had been canceled, I would be laying the foundation for their destruction. Justice had never felt so satisfying. Pulse Origin's first office was Maya's conference room, but it felt like mission control for a revolution. I sat surrounded by incorporation papers, client contact lists, and a laptop displaying the Pulse Chain code that was rightfully mine. Richardson Industries called this morning, Grant reported. They're very interested in rescheduling their demonstration. Richardson had been Nexora's biggest potential client, a logistics giant worth $40 million in first-year contracts. Now they were my first prospect. Maya handled the legal framework while I perfected my pitch. The story was compelling. A brilliant developer, betrayed by corporate politics, launching her own company with proven technology. The press is going to love this, Maya predicted. David versus Goliath, except David owns the slingshot. By noon, I had confirmed presentations with all 3 Fortune 500 companies that Nexora had lost. By evening, 2 venture capital firms had reached out about funding opportunities. The phone rang constantly, former colleagues asking about positions, clients requesting information, reporters sensing the story. Reid, meanwhile, was discovering that reputation traveled fast in the tech industry. My termination was being discussed in boardrooms and coffee shops alike, painting him as either incompetent or vindictive. Neither image helped his standing with investors. He's calling an emergency board meeting, Grant reported during an encrypted phone call from Nexora's offices. Trying to control the narrative. Let him, I replied. While he's explaining how he lost the company's most valuable asset, I'll be signing our first contracts. Tomorrow would bring the client presentations Reid had spent months preparing for, except now they belonged to me. The Richardson Industries boardroom was exactly what I had expected: mahogany table, leather chairs, and executives who measured success in quarterly earnings. But today, I wasn't representing Nexora Tech. I was representing the future. Miss Blake, Richardson's CEO said warmly, Jennifer Martinez speaks very highly of your work. She said you personally solved their logistics bottleneck last quarter. I smiled, remembering the late-night calls with Richardson's head of operations. Jennifer's team was dealing with inventory overflow in their Seattle facility. We implemented a predictive modeling solution that reduced their overhead by 28%. The personal relationships I'd built over months of client work were paying dividends. While Reid had focused on high-level networking, I had been solving actual problems for the people who would ultimately make purchasing decisions. Pulse Origin represents a fundamental shift in supply chain management. I continued, my confidence absolute. Our technology doesn't just track inventory. It predicts market fluctuations, optimizes logistics networks, and reduces operational costs by an average of 37%. The demonstration was flawless, but more importantly, it addressed specific pain points I documented during my Richardson consultations. What about implementation risk? Another executive asked. Switching platforms is expensive. That's why we're offering a 6-month parallel deployment, I replied. Your existing systems remain operational while Pulse Origin proves its value. No financial commitment until you see results. The risk mitigation strategy had been Maya's suggestion. Remove every barrier to switching vendors. This is exactly what we need, Jennifer Martinez said, nodding approvingly. Taryn understands our business. The competitive advantage was obvious. Intimate knowledge of client needs trumped corporate politics every time. Reid's emergency board meeting was a disaster from the opening statement. Seated around Nexora's executive conference table, board members listened with growing alarm as Reid tried to explain how the company's primary revenue driver had vanished overnight. You're telling us that our star employee owns the technology we've been marketing? The board chairman's voice was dangerously calm. The same technology that was supposed to reverse our financial decline? It's a technicality, Reid insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. A legal oversight that we can resolve. Legal oversight? Another board member pulled up financial projections on her tablet. Reid, we've been operating at mounting quarterly losses for over a year. Our investors specifically backed us because of PulseChain's revenue potential. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Nexora's financial vulnerability was worse than most employees knew. The company had been hemorrhaging money while betting everything on PulseChain's success. What about the acquisition talks? The chairman asked. Morrison Klein was specifically interested in our supply chain technology. Reid's silence spoke volumes. Without PulseChain, Nexora had no competitive advantage, no proprietary technology, and no realistic path to profitability. Where's the nephew now? Someone asked pointedly. Kellen submitted his resignation this morning, Reid admitted, citing personal reasons. The board exchanged meaningful glances. Reid's nepotistic decision hadn't just cost them a project, it had potentially bankrupted the company. And the clients? They're exploring alternatives. What Reid couldn't bring himself to say was that those alternatives all led to the same place. My new company, which offered superior technology and established relationships. The board meeting ended with a unanimous vote of no confidence. Reid was given 48 hours to present a recovery plan or face immediate termination. 3 days later, Pulse Origin signed its first major contract. Richardson Industries committed to a 2-year deal worth $45 million, with additional performance bonuses that could push the total to $52 million. The contract included options for expansion and exclusive development rights for their logistics network. I stood in my new office, a sleek space in the city's tech district, watching my team of former Nexora employees celebrate. Grant had brought over 6 developers. Maya had left her firm to become chief legal officer, and inquiries arrived daily from other talented professionals seeking to join the revolution. Phase 1 complete, Maya announced, raising a champagne glass. Ready for Phase 2? Phase 2 was expansion. The second Fortune 500 client had already scheduled their presentation, and preliminary discussions suggested an even larger contract. Industry publications were calling Pulse Origin the supply chain startup that's reshaping the market. Reid's attempts to discredit me had backfired spectacularly. His public statements about disloyal employees and corporate sabotage only reinforced the narrative of a brilliant woman standing up to corporate bullying. The tech community loved an underdog story, especially one involving innovative technology and righteous revenge. Any word from our former colleagues? I asked Grant. He grinned. Reid's been making increasingly desperate offers to former team members. Double salaries, equity packages, signing bonuses, nobody's interested. Why would they be? Pulse Origin offered something Nexora never could, the chance to work directly with the technology's creator, in an environment built on merit rather than politics. As the celebration continued, I reflected on how completely my world had changed. A week ago, I'd been a disrespected employee facing corporate betrayal. Now I was a CEO with the hottest technology in the industry. Reid's recovery plan was 3 pages of desperate promises and unrealistic timelines. The board rejected it unanimously. Mr. Mercer, the chairman said formally, effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as Chief Executive Officer of Nexora Tech. The termination was swift and merciless. Security escort, confiscated access cards, and a severance package that included strict non-disclosure agreements. Reid's decade of building Nexora ended with a cardboard box and a reputation in ruins. News of his termination spread through the industry within hours. Tech journalists, sensing blood in the water, published exposés about nepotism, intellectual property theft, and corporate mismanagement. Former Nexora CEO loses company after betraying star developer, read one headline. The rise and fall of Reid Mercer, a cautionary tale, read another. Kellen, who had hoped his quiet resignation would go unnoticed, found himself at the center of the scandal. His brief tenure as Pulse Chain's lead became a symbol of everything wrong with corporate nepotism. His phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comments, potential employers checking references, and former business school classmates offering awkward sympathy. The MBA that had once opened doors now felt like a scarlet letter. Meanwhile, I was fielding calls from venture capitalists, potential clients, and industry leaders who wanted to partner with the brilliant woman who'd outsmarted the system. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with compound interest. The final phase of my revenge was about to begin. 18 months after Pulse Origin's launch, I stood on the stage of TechCrunch Disrupt, addressing an audience of entrepreneurs, investors, and industry leaders. My keynote speech, Innovation Ownership in the Corporate Age, had become one of the conference's most talked about presentations. True innovation requires more than just technical skill, I told the packed auditorium. It requires the courage to protect your intellectual property and the wisdom to recognize when corporate politics threaten your vision. The audience was captivated. My story had become legendary in Silicon Valley, the brilliant developer who'd turned corporate betrayal into entrepreneurial triumph. Pulse Origin now employed 31 people, held contracts worth over $65 million, and was valued at $120 million in our latest funding round. Industry publications called it the most promising supply chain technology company to emerge in recent years. Maya, now featured in legal journals for her strategic IP protection work, watched from the front row with visible pride. Grant, whose title had evolved to Chief Operating Officer, managed a team of developers who'd revolutionized supply chain analytics across multiple industries. In the audience, representatives from dozens of companies waited to schedule meetings with the woman who'd disrupted their entire sector. Reid Mercer was not among them. His name had become synonymous with corporate failure and poor leadership. The few job offers he'd received came from companies with questionable ethics and desperate circumstances. The industry had moved on without him. Nexora Tech's dissolution was announced 18 months after my departure. The company that Reid had built over a decade was sold for parts, its remaining assets distributed among creditors and remaining shareholders. The official press release cited market challenges and strategic misalignment, but everyone in the industry knew the real story. Nexora had died the moment Reid chose family loyalty over business sense. I felt no satisfaction in the company's demise. Too many innocent employees had suffered for Reid's mistakes. But I'd hired 14 former Nexora workers, and my network had helped place others in good positions throughout the industry. Any regrets? Maya asked as we reviewed Pulse Origin's quarterly reports. About Nexora? No, I replied. About Reid personally? Maybe. He wasn't evil, just blinded by ego and desperation. What about Kellen? I considered this. Kellen had eventually found a position at a small marketing firm far from the tech industry, and apparently humbled by his experience. His social media presence had shifted from corporate arrogance to quiet professionalism. He learned an expensive lesson about merit versus entitlement, I said finally. That's probably worth more than any MBA. The irony wasn't lost on me. Reid's attempt to elevate his nephew had ultimately taught the young man the value of earning success rather than inheriting it. Pulse Origin's success had created something Reid never could, a company built on innovation, merit, and respect for intellectual achievement. It was the legacy I had always wanted to create. 3 years after its founding, Pulse Origin announced its international expansion. The London office would serve European clients, while the Singapore location would handle Asia-Pacific operations. I stood in Pulse Origin's headquarters, now occupying 2 floors of a prestigious downtown building, reviewing architectural plans for our new research and development center. Hard to believe this started in my conference room, Maya observed, joining me at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sometimes the best revenge is just being incredibly successful, I replied. Pulse chain technology had evolved far beyond its original scope. Machine learning algorithms now predicted market trends months in advance. Blockchain integration ensured supply chain transparency, and artificial intelligence optimization reduced operational costs by unprecedented margins. The 3 Fortune 500 companies that Reid had lost were now Pulse Origin's founding clients, their testimonials driving demand across multiple industries. Any word from our former associates? Maya asked. Reid's working for a small logistics company in Portland, I said. Kellen's apparently thriving in his marketing role. Some of the other Nexora executives have reached out for job opportunities. Are you hiring? Merit-based applications only, I grinned. No family connections, no corporate politics. Just talent and work ethic. It was a policy that had served Pulse Origin well. Our employee retention rate was 92%, and our innovation pipeline never slowed. The company culture Reid had destroyed through favoritism and ego had been reborn as something stronger. 6 years later, I was featured on the cover of Forbes magazine as Entrepreneur of the Year. The article detailed my journey from corporate employee to industry leader, highlighting both my technical innovations and my business acumen. But the moment that tested me most came during a private meeting that same week. Miss Blake, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. There's a Michael Torres here. He says he worked at Nexora and has a business proposal. I remembered Michael, a talented project manager who'd been caught in Nexora's collapse. He'd been one of the innocent casualties I'd worried about during those first conversations with Maya. When he entered my office, Michael looked older than his 38 years. Taryn, I know this is awkward, but I've developed an inventory management system that could complement Pulse Origin's offerings. I studied his proposal. Genuinely innovative work that deserved consideration. But the irony wasn't lost on me. Helping Michael could legitimize what I'd done to Nexora, or it could represent the cycle of innovation that transcended corporate politics. Michael, I have to ask, do you blame me for what happened to Nexora? He was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, at first, yes. I lost my job, my stock options became worthless, and my mortgage almost went into foreclosure. He paused. But then I realized you weren't the one who made the decision to replace you. Reid did that. You just protected your work. The conversation highlighted the lingering complexity of my choices. Even justified revenge created ripples that touched innocent lives. What about funding? I asked, genuinely interested in his technology. That's the thing. Michael smiled ruefully. Every investor I've talked to wants to know about my experience working with the woman who took down Nexora. It's become my primary qualification. My story had become larger than my choices, inspiring other innovators while serving as a cautionary tale about corporate betrayal. Today, I sit in my corner office, watching young entrepreneurs pitch their ideas to Pulse Origin's venture capital division. I've created something Reid never could, a company that invests in innovation rather than politics, though I've learned that even righteous victories cast long shadows. My story has become required reading in business schools, a case study in intellectual property protection and entrepreneurial resilience. But professors also use it to discuss the ethical complexities of corporate warfare, how protecting your own interests can inadvertently harm others. Michael Torres has become Pulse Origin's newest portfolio company, his inventory management system showing remarkable promise. During our partnership meetings, I sometimes catch him studying me with curiosity, as if trying to reconcile the woman who destroyed his former employer with the mentor investing in his future. The phone on my desk rings, interrupting my thoughts. My assistant's voice comes through the speaker. Miss Blake, there's a young developer here who says she has revolutionary ideas about predictive analytics applications in logistics. Should I schedule a meeting? I smile, remembering my own journey from passionate innovator to industry leader, and the prices others have paid for my success. Send her in, I say. Let's see what she's got. As the door opens, I find myself hoping this brilliant young woman will never face the choice between protecting her work and protecting her conscience. Innovation should be about building the future, not tearing down the past. But sometimes the world forces you to choose. The young developer walks in with nervous excitement, eyes bright with possibility. "Miss Blake, I think I've figured out how to revolutionize supply chain predictions using advanced machine learning." I lean forward, genuinely interested. "Tell me everything," I say, knowing that true innovation deserves protection, whatever the cost.